about that conference and go and join the fun. My other announcement I'm actually invited to, and it's our first Sunday, and that is happening today, and I'm allowed to go to that one. And so are you. If you are new to New Hope, New Hope Lucas, one of our favorite things is community and to commune together. And on the first Sunday of every month, that's today, we take communion, and then we go out into the cafeteria and share a meal together. If you didn't bring something to share, that's okay. There's going to be food here, and if there's not enough, we'll order more. But the point is to be together, and we want you to be with us, even if this is your first time. Like I said, we want to know you, and we want you to know us. So please join us at the end of the service for a meal together, all right? Why don't we stand and greet one another and make sure everyone feels welcome this morning?
Good morning. How are y'all? You good? Look at your smiling faces. Good to see y'all. Y'all look beautiful. I'm going to set this timer so I'm not like last week where I went too long. I'm going to be on it. Well, I want to welcome all of you here. And those join us online, thank you. And yes, show them some love. And to you who are visiting, like Juanita mentioned, we're really, really glad to have you. And this series we're kicking off, or not kicking off, but we're in part 4 of a series titled Habits, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And I think this is a pretty relevant, timely series. For one, of course, it's now we're like early in the year, so there's kind of a sense of people often trying to stop doing bad things, start doing good things, and get some new habits going. And I think another reason, though, this series is pretty relevant is because if you look in the Bible, there are people who live just absolutely remarkable lives. These are people, we'd probably call them sort of quote unquote like heroes of the faith. I'm thinking of someone, say like Daniel. Daniel, if you recall in the Bible, he's the guy that made it through the lion's den. Daniel and the lions, and that's his famous story. He spent a night with lions and lived. And we often will hear sort of ancient stories about the great heroes of faith like Daniel, and we'll say, oh, well, that's wonderful for them. If only I could be like them. If only I could have such faith to be lowered down into a pit of lions. And yet, no, the Lord my God shall protect me. But even if he does not, it is okay. I shall be at peace, right? So we look at someone like Daniel and we're like, yes, that's awesome, man. I wish I could be like you. But the thing is, what we don't pay attention to, what are the habits? What are the rhythms? What are the practices that Daniel engaged such that he could be lowered into a pit of lions and not just be freaking out like every other human, probably most of us, me included, would be, right? And this is a habit of Daniel, right? He was known for 3 times a day, he would go into his room and he would pray, not once, not twice, 3 times a day, every day. And I mean, it got to the point where everyone knew, where's Daniel? Oh, that's right. Because they knew at these set times, he was, what happened there? He was shaped, he was formed by a habits, right? And there he met with God, and there was a deep connection, and that led him to right? So in other words, we often, one way I heard this put is, we will sort of optimize for the finish line instead of optimizing for the starting line. In other words, we optimize for, oh yeah, I want to be there. I want to get to that place. And so we like write out goals and dreams like, I'm going to be awesome. I'm going to be full of faith. I'm going to, we're sort of all of these grand things. What we're not thinking about and sort of obsessing over is optimizing for the starting line. How do I get to here so I can actually get there, right? How do I sit down to actually read the Bible? How do I take time to actually engage, say, prayer or solitude or, all the various practices and habits that we know those are good habits, we know. But it's like, I just want to be there. Y'all tracking with me? So that's sort of what this series is about, is trying to optimize for the starting line to say, okay, what are the starting points? What are the basics here, some good habits we can engage? So with that in mind, the title of my message today is The Habit of Connection. And I'm thinking here specifically of relational connection. Because I think what we need to learn, we often have relationships. So like, oh yes, there are people I know, I have coworkers, I have, maybe a spouse or some friends. But where we struggle is to go deeper in those relationships. So that's why I named it not just the habit of friendship or the habit of having acquaintances or even the habit of community, because that can sort of be like, I have community. I totally shook hands on Sunday morning. They even knew my name. And it's like, well, that's awesome. but to be shaped, to be formed, to be nourished in a powerful way, there's going to have to be something deeper. The habit, so it's not just friendship or community, but it's the habit of connection. How do we connect? All right, so our text is from John chapter 17, verses 20 and 21. This is Jesus speaking. This is one of his prayers, actually. He says, I do not ask on behalf of these alone, that would be the disciples, the 12, the famous 12 disciples, but for those also who believe in me through their word. Guess who that is? You. Yes, us, right? Those who believe in me through their word. And this is a remarkable prayer. Verse 21, that they may all be one, even as you, Father, are in me and I in you, that they also may be in us, so that the world may believe that you sent me. Now that was a lot of you and in me, and so let me reread that. That they may all be one, right? That's a picture of unity. Even as you, Father, are in me and I in you, that they also may be in us, so that the world may believe that you sent me. I love this passage because it's a passage of connection. What's Jesus saying? He's naming, let me adjust my mic here. He's naming that this is a remarkable prayer. Right? That he's saying, Lord, in the same way you and I are connected, that's like how close were Jesus and the Father? Pretty close, right? I mean, even the whole idea of the Trinity and this idea of three and one. That is close. And that's crazy. He's saying, in the same way we are connected, may they be connected at that kind of level, right? That's why I say, this is more than, I totally shook hands. It's nothing to not down on shaking hands. That's beautiful, right? And it has to start there. But eventually, we got to go deeper. There's a deeper connection, I think, that God is calling us to. And honestly, we live in a culture that is plagued by what? By disconnection. Plagued by loneliness. Plagued by this sense of isolation. And at the end of the day, isolation kills. Loneliness, that kills. And that's not just poetry. Like, that's science. Right? How do you torture a human being? Well, you can torture them sort of physically, but you can torture them psychologically by doing what? Yeah, solitary confinement, right? Get them alone. And what happens? We get lost in the hell of our own minds. Why? Because we just are desperate to connect with others. And honestly, that is God's grace to us, right? God meets us in my brother, in my sister. God meets you through the people to your left and to your right and in front and behind. Like, that is God's grace. So what I want to do, I want to get really practical this morning. I want to give three, I've been struggling with what to name these. They're sort of counterintuitive practices that lead us to forming the habit of connection. So these are sort of three things we can actually do and engage that will lead us to a place of deeper connection with one another, with our friends, with a spouse, with our children, just whatever the relationships are. Here's the first one. The first is asking over telling, that we have to begin to prioritize asking over telling. And here's what I mean. It's very easy to do a lot of speaking, a lot of talking, right? Like we say, I want to connect. I want to connect with people. I know, so I've got to talk a lot. And it's like, well, but there's actually a deeper way. Right? That's part of it, to be able to share your heart, to be able to, this is who I am. That's important. But ultimately, if you really want to go deeper, it's a little bit counterintuitive, but you have to learn to ask good questions. Jesus, I've mentioned this before, Jesus was an amazing question asker, wasn't he? Like if you've ever read some of the Bible and the stories of Jesus, I mean, he's constantly asking questions. There's a number of them I jotted down. He asked this to his disciples. Why are you so afraid? Now, was it because he didn't know? No, he knew. But he's drawing them out, right? They needed to know. They needed to understand. So he asked, why are you so afraid? Another one from the Gospel of Matthew. He says, but who do you say that I am? Right? So it's not, because he could have said, now guys, everyone sit down. Now let me tell you who I am. I am Jesus the Christ, the Son of God, the second person of the Trinity, et cetera, et cetera. And they're kind of like, okay, taking notes, But what was the important thing, right? That they came to name it for themselves. And here's the beautiful thing. I think when we actually ask questions, it invites people into relationship with us, right? So there's something powerful about being asked. And it's like it draws us out. If you're taking notes, you can write this down. Telling creates distance. Questions facilitate connection. Right? Telling creates distance. Questions, it facilitates deep connection. And I think we don't quite get that because it's a little bit counterintuitive. Because we think, I don't know what to say. I had this conversation just like 2 weeks ago with a guy who's talking about, going on like date time with his spouse. And so they needed a date. And so he was really, he was just worried about going on dates. And because this is what he said. Well, you may be way ahead of me. What did he say? I don't know what to say, right? I mean, it's an hour and a half or 2 hours just talking. I don't know what to say, right? Or I'll have a similar situation where people, and by the way, you guys, that's super sweet. Don't worry. You guys, don't freak out. Don't freak out. It is beautiful, isn't it? Beautiful. It's beautiful. So that's a blessing. Another example of this is people ask me about counseling. And honestly, when I first became pastor, I was nervous, right, about counseling. Like someone's going to sit in front of me and I have to counsel. I have to give them counsel. What do I say? I mean, I guess I just give them Bible verses or something, but like, and people now today will be like, oh my gosh, I could never do it. I don't know how you counsel. But here's the thing. What did I learn? It's not about telling. It's not about saying, right? Whether you're on the date or you're counseling or whatever, what do? You ask questions. I love counseling now because I barely say anything. Just ask questions. I had a gentleman who walked in this week. And he's not from here. Totally just random guy, actually. He's never been a part of New Hope. But just down in the dumps of life. His life, it's a mess. Whatever you think you're going through. He's to the point, he's tried to commit suicide 4 times in the distant past. It's a mess. And I can imagine 5 years ago, I'd freak out. I don't even know him. What am I supposed to say? I don't know, man. What do I do? Just ask questions. How are you feeling? What are you going through? What do you feel like is your next step? How are you feeling with God? Does he feel close to you or does he feel far away? Are there people in your life you feel like you can rely on? No? Why not, right? Just question. And it's just so beautiful the way it just draws us out, right? This is how we facilitate relationship with each other. And I'm thinking, is it a little bit distracting with that sound? Is that okay? I can grab I'm going to switch mics, if that's okay. Because I keep hearing this little So, can we switch over? Boom. Y'all are on it. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Grant. Can we give them a hand? They are awesome. So, I've actually want to invite up my friend, Gary Miner, he's got a beautiful story that I think just really ties in with this point about questions. So you all give him a hand. Here you go, man.
So I noticed that I didn't get a stool, so obviously I need to keep it quick. So before, I've learned about this whole principle of asking versus telling for quite a while now. It's part of our culture here at New Hope. And let me tell you, it's possible to ask a question but still make it a telling statement. Like my daughter was getting ready for school one day, and I'm kind of trying to get into the bathroom, and I said to her, I'm thinking, okay, how can I make this a question without telling her to hurry up? So I say, hey, is watching your iPhone right now helping you get ready faster? And she was like, leave me alone, Dad, and closed the door. I'm like, oh, that didn't go so well. So you can ask a question and still have it be a statement, a telling statement. So that's not what we're talking about. A better example is while I was in sabbatical with our family, one of the things we tried to put in place was spending quality time with each other individually. And so one morning I decided to take Noelle out for breakfast. And, I'd say, let's put our phones away. Let's just connect do some eyeball time. And we're sitting there, and I asked her I think this is a Brett question that I stole from Brett. How is Noelle doing today? And she responded in third person, Noelle is seeking attention from Daddy. That hit me right in the heart. And I just remember saying back to her, Noelle, I'm trying. I'm really trying. And not to say that, things are always great between us. Just a few days later, there was a blow up between us. And, but I think in the blow up situations, kind of what happens is I forget to listen. And I think that's the other part of asking good questions is really being a great listener. And not just listening at the surface, but really listening to their heart and listening what it is that God's putting on your heart. Sometimes it's not even something you can sense in the physical. It's a spiritual thing. You just kind of think about, what is God asking here? And so that's what I invite you to do.
Give him a hand. Thank you, Gary. Gary's on our core leadership team, and he's an awesome guy. And I love that story because it's such what a great question. How is Noelle? And we got to learn to do that, right? To ask people, to tune in a little bit deeper level and ask those questions that can help to draw them out. All right, so that's first, asking over telling and prioritizing that. Second is faces over screens. So we've got to start to prioritize faces over screens. I'm getting some amens. I'm getting some hand pumps. And some of you are freaking out, probably like, what? Faces over this. I'm passionate about this one. In our day and age, there's nothing more intuitive than picking up our phone. Right? It's just, it's almost just it's in us. It's in our bones. It's like in our DNA now. Like, if we have like a lull, and you're standing in line, and it can be like there's 10 seconds of downtime. What do I do? Oh, thank God. That's right. Yes. We're just faces over screens. I love this passage from Proverbs. It says, let your eyes look directly ahead and let your gaze be fixed straight in front of you. Isn't that a beautiful picture of focus, of attention? Right, and isn't that what we're longing for? People are longing for our attention. You want to go deeper? You want to form connection? And prioritize the face. Right, because where I'm looking at, that's what I focus on. And what we focus on, that's what we move towards, both physically, but emotionally. Right, that's where we go. And it communicates so powerfully when we can prioritize people in their faces and in that kind of presence. I had a situation. I had a moment a few weeks back where I was on my screen. I'm just kind of going. I'm like had hands just flying. My thumb was just flying. I'm just scrolling and reading. And my boy Dax, my oldest boy, he comes up to me. He's 7, and he's like, Dad, and he starts just talking. And I don't know what he was talking about because I was not listening. To this day, I don't actually know what he was saying. And so he's talking, and I started doing the thing, to try to communicate that I'm listening when I'm really not. I make noises, just like sort of grunts, I've noticed this is what happens when we're not really listening. We go overkill on that. Have you noticed? Like there's a tasteful way to do that where it's, every 30 seconds or so, you kind of make a certain noise to communicate, right? That's sort of tasteful, like, and it has to be silence. But someone's not listening when it's just chronic, it's just like, okay, so that was me. So there I am. Suddenly, little hands are on my phone, on the top of my phone, and they're pushing it down. It's going down, and I'm just following. It's like I took that as a sign of just concentrate harder. I'm just following. Suddenly, I feel little hands on my face, right on my cheeks. And I'm looking at my phone, and these hands, and they bring my face up. And Dax says, Daddy, you aren't listening to me. And you know what? He was correct. See, this is what happens. I don't even remember what I was looking at because it didn't matter. It didn't matter. What matters is him, right? And do we have things to do? Yes, right? Can we just neglect all technology and never respond to any text again or never email? Well, right? Of course not. But I'm saying prioritize, right? If you've got to cut somewhere, if you've got to emphasize something, emphasize this. In fact, there was a study done. These researchers took couples to a coffee shop, had them hang out and observe them, and then had them rate the quality of the conversation later. They did this with 200 couples, and what they found was that the presence of a phone on the table next to them, that alone, was enough to lower the quality of the interaction. Just the phone was, it could have been off. But just the phone, it was just there. No one necessarily picked it up. No one's like, can you hold on? It wasn't even that. Just the presence of the phone lowered the quality of the interaction. This is huge. Now you may be thinking, well, this isn't spiritual. No, actually, this is spiritual. Like this stuff matters. The way we tune in, the way we connect with others, that's back to John 17, right? God, I'm praying that they are one as you and I are one. And so if we're going to be one with people, if we're going to pay attention and connect, we've got to start to prioritize faces, presence over screens. Andrew Sullivan was a blogger, very super famous, especially in the early to mid 2007, 8. Huge blogger, millions of readers. He was notorious for posting not once or twice, but 3, 4, 5 times a day. In fact, in 2007, he upped the ante and began to post every 30 minutes. And he's just chronic, just pumping them out, these posts. And after 15 years of this, he writes his final post. And this is one of his last articles. It was titled, "I used to be a human being." And he named that screens and information had taken over his life. And that all of his relationships had gone south. His life was a disaster. And so he quits. But at the end of the article, he was a Christian. At the end of the article, he wrote these words. He said, "The greatest threat to the church today is not hedonism, but distraction." You say, what's hedonism? That's the ideas of living for pleasure, right? And this is often how we think of that's the danger. That's the danger in the world. That's the enemy of the church and the enemy of my marriage, or whatever key relationship. It's hedonism. It's sex and alcohol and drugs, and that's what's wrong with the world today. But what if the greatest threat to your relationships isn't all those things? What if it's just simple distraction? What if that's what's alienating and eating us up? And we've got to prioritize faces over screens. Third, weakness over strength. Weakness over strength. The genius and insight of the Apostle Paul. Really, his genius was that he understood that the beauty of Christ was not in his tremendous power, but it was the fact that he came into the world in weakness, right? Because this is how we often think of God, right? We say God He's the remote one. He's the distant one. He's the almighty one away out there. But what happens? What happened in Jesus? God has what? He has come close. Right? He's not far, he's close. He doesn't now just dwell in inaccessible light, as 1 John says. He's just, we can't even approach him. He's so, well, in Jesus, he has come close. There's a line from Jürgen Moltmann, a German theologian, where he said, omnipotence. This is an attribute of God, right? It means being all-powerful. He said, omnipotence cannot be loved, only feared. And I think this is the beauty of Jesus, right? Is that he came among us in weakness, in humility, in kindness. And that's why we love him. And that's why we connect, right? And I love this quote from Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He said, God lets himself be pushed out of the world and onto the cross. God is weak and powerless in the world, and it is precisely in that way that he is for us. That's Christianity, right? Like that's a tremendous, like just think on that for this week. Like, what does it mean that God came among us, not as the all-powerful one, but he came among us in humility and weakness and frailty. And yet it's precisely in that way that we connect with him. It's that, like, that's the invitation, right? Is for us to love him because he's accessible, right? God is one of us. And I think that in and of itself really is sort of an invitation for us to be like that with others, right? Because often this is what hinders our connection, right? Is we want to be the best. We want to be the smartest. We want to be, somebody worth knowing. But that actually creates distance. That actually can distance us. One way you can, if you're taking notes, write this down. Strengths impress, but weakness connects. See, our strengths, they can sort of impress others, right? But it's actually as we share our weaknesses, as we actually come in vulnerability, that's how we connect. There's a quote from a humanitarian and Christian Jean Vanier. He spent his life with adults with developmental disabilities. And he said this. He said, I am struck by how sharing our weakness and difficulties is more nourishing to others than sharing our good qualities and successes. We want to go deeper. It's counterintuitive. But don't lead with your strengths. Don't lead with, these are all my accomplishments, love me. That's not, no, lead with vulnerability, lead with honesty, lead with transparency, lead with, I'm struggling, lead with, can you help me? Can you pray for me? And just watch how that starts to connect you. Because it's this invitation, right, to receive from others. People want to be needed. They do. People want to be needed. It's just hard because we don't want to be needy, right? We don't want to be the needy ones. And I'll be honest, I am the worst. I'm the worst at this. This is one of those points where I'm preaching very much to myself. If those who know me, this is not my jam. Because why? I don't know why. It's probably something about how, little 5-year-old Brett trying to impress the world or something. But it's something we've got to. In essence, we have to be strong enough to be weak. Right? Got to be. There's an inner strength there, a trust in God that says, okay, deep breaths. I'm going to be my true self. And God, meet me in the midst of it. And he will. And so as we come to the table of the Lord today, we're coming to meet with the one who wasn't among us as the one who had it all together, but we come to meet with the one who met us in weakness, the one who we can connect with, the relatable Christ, who knows what it is to be human, who knows what it is to be imperfect. So let me pray, and then we'll transition into communion. Lord, I thank you
I thank you for every person here. And I ask, God, that you would help each of us just to go deeper in our relationship with you, deeper in our relationship with others. There are friendships here who are languishing. God, would you bring real connection? There are marriages here struggling. Would you bring deep connection? And help us to take the steps that can ensure that happens. In Christ's name I pray. Amen. So we are going to be taking communion, and I realize not everyone's familiar with that practice. So this is a very ancient ritual. It goes all the way back to Jesus' final meal with his disciples. And during that meal, he stood up and he took a loaf of bread and he broke it. And he said, "This is my body." And then he held up a cup of wine and he said, "This is my blood. Whenever you eat this bread, whenever you drink this cup, remember me. Remember me." And so for 2,000 years, Christians have come to the Lord's table to remember the humble one, to remember the broken one, broken body, blood poured out. So as you come, people often wonder, like, well, how do I do this? Don't worry, instructions are going to be on the screen, so you can relax. It's very easy. We're just going to form 2 lines. You come forward, you tear off a piece of bread, you dip it in the cup. You can take it immediately. You can come at the front and kneel. You can return to your seat and take it there, however you'd like, or as a family off to the side, whatever you'd like. We do have a number of people in recovery from substance abuse, so we use non-alcoholic wine. That would be grape juice. And so that's a concern for you. No worries at all. And finally, we practice what's called an open table, meaning if you're here today and you want to meet with Jesus, then you just come right on forward. And you say, well, I don't know if I have it all together. I don't really know much about theology. And well, you just come. If you want to meet with the risen one, then you come forward. So this is an ancient Celtic Christian invitation. It goes like this. This is the table, not of the church, but of the Lord. Of the Lord. And it is his will that those who want to meet him should meet him here. So come. You who have much faith, and you who have little, you who have been here often, and you who have not been here long, you who have tried to follow, and you who have failed, come, because it is the Lord himself who invites you, and it is his will that those who want to meet him should meet him here. Come to the table. We thank you. We thank you for the cross. We thank you for the beautiful example of love and forgiveness and justice that it is. Help us to live into that, Lord. In Christ's name I pray. Amen. So in just a moment, the ushers are going to come forward. We're going to receive the offering. If you're visiting, please do not feel any pressure or obligation to give. This is really just this service. We just want it to be a gift to you. And so if you call New Hope home, then this is our chance to worship God through giving back to him what he's given to us. So they'll go ahead and receive that, and we'll close with this final song. So I love you guys, and we'll see you for our meal outside.
I will not forget you. You are my God, my King. With a thankful heart, I bring my offering, and my sacrifices, not what you can give, but what I alone can give to you. Grateful heart I give, a thankful prayer I pray, a wild dance I dance before you, loud song I sing, a huge bell I ring, life of praise I live before you. A grateful heart I give, a thankful prayer I pray, a wild dance I dance before you, loud song I sing, a huge bell I ring, life of praise I live before you. I will not forget you. You are my God, my King. With a thankful heart, I bring my offering and my sacrifices, not what you can give, but what I alone can give to you.
Amen. Amen. It's so good to be with you all. Truly, truly, truly. Hey, don't leave. If there's something that you need to share, something that's on your heart, and you need some prayer, there's going to be people up here. We just want to connect with you. We want to hear your story. We want to pray with you and support you in any ways that we can. So even if you see people leaving and tearing stuff down, don't leave without doing that. I want to remind you that we are going to have a community meal together right now, as soon as I say go. And that's going to be right there in the cafeteria. The only caveat is if you have children, you have to go get your kids first. Please go get your kids first and then go join us for the meal. We just want to connect together. I'm going to say a quick prayer and then we'll go eat, okay? Father, thank you so much for the ways that you demonstrate to us what true community and communion looks like. Help us to lean into that. Help us to be marked by that. Help us to love one another, by asking good questions and being great listeners. Bless the food and the hands that prepared it and our time together. In your name, amen.